Hey guys, I took a week-long break from even thinking about making videos, which was nice, but I'm happy to be back, and today I have a review on Swing Time by Zadie Smith, which was longlisted for this year's Man Booker Prize, and is a strange book to talk about for a few reasons. One is that it's made me think a lot about how much expectations going into a book influence our experience of it. So for context, this was my first Smith, and I think that really mattered. She's an author who's so critically acclaimed and widely read, but it's also become a little unfashionable to say you love Zadie Smith. People don't just love her. There's always some qualification of, I liked this book of hers, but not this one. I enjoy this aspect of her writing, but not that one. She engages me intellectually, but not emotionally. So on the one hand, my expectations were way higher than they would have been for a random author. But on the other, on BookTube, this has gotten mostly lukewarm reviews, and it was absolutely in Swing Time's favor. I think that I hadn't read any of her other books, because it's possible one of the main sources of disappointment is that this falls flat in comparison with something like White Teeth or On Beauty. But personally, not having been able to make those comparisons, I'm really glad I read it, and I think it has a lot to offer. It's odd. I have to treat this like it's two different books in a couple respects. So here's the first. One part is the actual reading experience, what it was like to go through this book page by page, which was wonderful. And the other is the experience of looking back on the book and considering what it all amounted to, which is really unsatisfying. So this story follows an unnamed narrator in two separate timelines. One is of her childhood growing up in London, and the other is of her job working as an assistant to a pop star as an adult. And for most of the book, we alternate chapters between the two timelines. This was fun to read. I'm always concerned with a popular author that I'll be in the minority of people who aren't on board the hype train. And I was worried that Zadie Smith would be too highbrow for me, but I found her writing super engaging. And beyond that, by the time I was 2-3 chapters in, I was like, oh, this is why she's a big deal. There's a self-assuredness and a commanding eloquence to her writing that stands out even in comparison to the other authors who were longlisted for the Booker this year. A lot of them wrote better overall books, but few can hold a candle to Smith when you're looking at individual paragraphs. That being said, this is a book with a lot of strengths that don't coalesce, and a lot of that springs from Swing Time's main flaw, which is that internally, it's basically two separate books, and one of them is significantly more pedestrian than the other. So one is the childhood book, where the narrator talks about meeting her best friend Tracy at a dance class. Tracy is naturally talented and the narrator isn't, but they're originally drawn to each other because they're the only two biracial girls in the class. This section also focuses on her strained relationships with her parents. Her father's white, he's a postal worker, and a humble man who's so in love with her mother. And her mother's black. She's a largely self-taught academic and a social justice warrior, and she's passionate about political systems, but removed when it comes to individual people. These childhood sections have so much energy. There's such a specificity to the narrator's recollections and reactions. Her relationship with Tracy is filled with the conflicting feelings of a close childhood friendship. Warmth, jealousy, silliness, cruelty, that dynamic where they're repelled by each other at times, but somehow life is better when they're together. And her relationship with her mother is also fascinating. I'm going to read you a quote from early on in the book to give you an idea. "What do we want from our mothers when we are children? Complete submission. Oh, it's very nice and rational and respectable to say that a woman has every right to her life, to her ambitions, to her needs, and so on. It's what I've always demanded myself. But as a child, no. The truth is, it's a war of attrition. Rationality doesn't come into it, not one bit. All you want from your mother is that she once and for all admit that she is your mother and only your mother, and that her battle with the rest of life is over. She has to lay down arms and come to you. And if she doesn't do it, then it's really a war, and it was a war between my mother and me. Only as an adult did I come to truly admire her, especially in the last painful years of her life. for all that she'd done to claw some space in this world for herself. Beyond the characters, the childhood book is packed with ideas about what it's like to be biracial and how much that varies from person to person, and about early sexualization of girls, the magnetic nature of talent, classic dance, and blackface, and cultural appropriation. And this narrator isn't a memorable personality, but there's a complexity and an unscripted quality to her thoughts in these sections that make her seem like a real person, not just a thematic vehicle for the author. The second novel within this novel, which follows the narrator as an adult, is a lot weaker. In these sections, she travels around the globe working for a pop star named Amy. Amy decides that she wants to open a school for girls in a village in West Africa, and so the narrator ends up making a lot of trips there to monitor its progress. There are a lot of interesting ideas floating around in these sections about white saviorism, general ignorance when it comes to individual African countries and cultures, how money and fame are completely divorced from morality, and the narrator also subtly engages in capturing the rhythm of life in this village and how the classic dance she loved as a child in some ways sprang from these West African influences. But much more so than in the childhood novel, the adult one feels like random insights strung together. I couldn't fault individual paragraphs, and I enjoyed all the observations, but a lot of them read more like the beginnings of essays than fluid contributions to a novel. The other main problem is that in the childhood book, you have these two female figures, Tracy and the mother, who dominate the narrator's life and shape her ideas of who she is and more importantly for her in some ways, who she isn't. Amy is technically supposed to fulfill this same role in the adult section, but she doesn't hold her weight in the same way. She's a caricature. Vapid, self-obsessed, high energy, willfully ignorant. The only redeeming quality for her comes when you compare her to the narrator. Amy's misguided, but at least she's passionate. The narrator might have more discerning judgment, but she's detached from everything. She cares enough to comment on things, but never enough to do anything. But other than that, the way that Smith uses Amy as a commentary on modern stardom is usually just as shallow as the character herself. I'm sure Smith and her publisher have reasons why both storylines are necessary to the novel's overall goals, and you can find ways to tie them together, but the fact is that these books could be pulled apart and published separately without creating any significant problems, which really shouldn't be the case. It's not that the adult novel is bad, it's something that most authors would be proud to have written, but especially when the chapters alternate, it's just clear which narrative is fresher. And this book is about 450 pages long, and I honestly think Smith should have just cut the adult novel and had a brilliant, cohesive 200-page book about the childhood stuff. But I do want to emphasize that despite these large criticisms, I enjoyed almost every page of this book. It's just a great read, so I do recommend it if any of the topics that I've mentioned have caught your interest. And I'm excited to read more from Zadie Smith now. Before, as someone who reads a lot of contemporary fiction by women, I sort of felt obligated to pick up some of her books, but now I'm really looking forward to them. Let me know what you think about Swing Time or Smith in general, and I'll see you soon. Bye guys. Thanks for watching.